The Austro-Prussian War, 7 weeks' war, or Deutsches Bürgerkrieg, was fought between Prussia and the Austrian-led German Confederation over the control of the leadership of the German states. German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck had alienated the Austrians through careful diplomacy, and Helmut von Moltke the Elder's curated tactics had devastated the Confederation's troops. The war lasted 7 weeks, with its titular battle at Königgrätz being the final major blow to the German Confederation. The Prussians had won due to new technologies such as the Trese needle gun and smooth-bore breech-loading artillery, as well as the implementation of squad-based tactics, rapid-fire tactics, and fast mobilization. To the French, the war was a major cause of concern, knowing they were next on the Prussian hit list. They studied Prussia's tactics religiously in hopes to find a weakness or a counter. They adopted most of the tactics used in the war, as well as some of the technologies, moving away from muskets and manufacturing repeaters and single loaders. They also began digging trenches to shield themselves from the oncoming fire. Napoleon III wanted his army to be able to stop the Prussians hard in their tracks and score the great victories his uncle before him. Some of the big oversights in the French planning revolved around their own ego. While they understood better than the British that these new tactics were superior and that repeaters were the future of rifling, they referred to breech loaders as a waste of time and believed muzzle loaders still to be far superior. The carbine à tigre was the French weapon of preference, being muzzle-loaded, and this would later change to the chaise-porte rifle, which was superior to the chaise needle. The French also believed Prussian skirmisher tactics were doomed to fail, and that the company independence would only lead to mass disorganization and ruin any potential momentum. They also believed that French people were far superior to their foes, saying the only real reason the Prussians won was due to major cultural, religious, and ethnic division of the Austrians. Quoting a scholar, while the Austrian army may have been an incredible babel of all the peoples in the Indo-European race, homogeneous French would be a tougher challenge for Prussia, divided by mores and interests in religion. None of this was helped by Napoleon III himself, as he diplomatically angled Prussia into the war to the benefit of the Italians. He hoped to weaken the Prussian state while also strengthening the new Italian nation he helped form, and to divert Italian gaze from France-protected Rome. Napoleon III met with the German Chancellor Otto von Bismarck at Brietz and concluded that Prussia will help secure Venetia for Italy, and France will stay out of meddling in German and Austrian relations. This was seen as a victory for both sides and successfully alienated the Austrians. The French ultimately were fearful of the coming war, but by far the most out-of-touch response to the war, seeing it more as Austrian failure than Prussian ingenuity. Their tests with the Trese needle gun showed complications in the weapon's reliability, as well as potential maintenance issues. They decided that breech loaders are not an advancement, but rather a setback, and a book published by Colonel Edward Hamley complained about the breech loaders and forced the British government to delay adopting them. Hamley's book also completely undermined the tactics of Moltke the Elder, describing them as outdated and not enough information to make a real prediction. Some British citizens also took a very hostile approach to the Prussians, as German unification meant losing the Hanoverian vassal state forever, and the loss of territory rarely leaves a good taste in people's mouths. Some would even go as far to be openly hostile to the Prussian people and the idea of a German identity, with one student writing, "The Prussian yoke is as unanimously detested by the entire population of every class and every age and every religion as that of Bonaparte was detested by the Prussians themselves." The Brits also had a very hands-off approach to the European continent. They owned a third of the world and would much rather spend their time maintaining the hegemony rather than fight for the Austrians. They had also recently finished the Indian Mutiny and had to recoup their losses and maintain imperial stability. Entering a major war could destroy the fragile peace set in place and re-spark the flames of civil war. With the era of Pax Britannica well under the way, the shifting tides of Europe meant very little to the royal line. America's massive German population made most Americans view the German wars of unification more favorably. While the war between the Prussians and the Austrians was of little concern across the pond, it did not mean that the Americans did not take expanded interest into it. The Baltimore Sun even covered the war and its peace in extreme detail, mostly using contact with the British. Because the war was seen through the eyes of a British lens, it was a bit biased against the Prussians. However, the large ethnic population balanced the opinions. Another reason for the lack of interest has to do with the recent civil war the Americans fought. Restoring and reintegrating the fractured Union took up the majority of the Americans' focus, leaving very little room for interest in engaging in foreign politics. There were no strongly written letters, no favoritism to either side, only reconstruction. And with the frontier wars still waging on, the American populace also had much more on their plate to worry about than people dying in Europe. Ultimately, the war served only as entertainment for the average citizen. After the war, most minor German states were drawn to Prussia being the leading power, as that was the whole purpose for the war. All the states in the north and the east joined under the Prussian flag, forming the North German Confederation. The southern states of Bavaria, Württemberg, Baden, and southern Hesse did not immediately join. They would wait until the French declared war on Germany to unite with the north. The Germans also felt a distinguished hatred for the Austrians, as the Austrians showed major signs of aggression, ignoring both the treaties of Gaston as well as attempting an alliance with the French, a sworn German enemy. The province of Augustenburg also fueled hatred, as the Austrians refused to negotiate over it at all, keeping it as a core part of Austria instead of Prussia or even Schleswig-Holstein. The discussion over Augustenburg almost caused the war to start earlier. Many minor German states couldn't mobilize fast enough to fight back, which resulted in Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph to ridicule them publicly, causing further divide between the minor German nations and Austrian power. The southern states ended the war in a state of neutrality. Thanks to French oversight and peace accords, the Bavarian and Swabian regions became independent to create a neutral buffer between the realms. Nevertheless, the nationalistic spirit ran high all through the German peoples. The idea of a united and prosperous Germany was on everyone's tongues. Where the Frankfurt Parliament had failed to unite the state, Bismarck's war had fulfilled its shoes, and a nation by the Germans, for the Germans, of the Germans seemed inevitable. The last issue was the integration of the southern states, and while they were still more sympathetic to the new North German state, they were barred from entry due to Napoleon III's imposing demands and directing the Treaty of Prague, an action that directly violated previous meetings at Biarritz, in a discussion that would later be used to alienate the French, paint them as the aggressors, and unite the German people under one flag. The Austro-Prussian War saw new technological advancements in the war, as well as the reworking of old tactics and even the introduction of new ones. Where careful diplomacy and cunningness stacked the deck in one man's favor, it starved his adversary. Where iron and blood made a nation great, it ripped the other of its old glory. Where one signature signed over which was once held for a millennium. The world watched as the new power emerged and swiftly made center stage. A power not made from commerce, but from conquest, one that showed no sign of stopping. For what is now more than a forgotten war lies the format necessary that turned an ambitious and up-and-coming nation like Prussia into the powerhouse that was the German Empire. Europe was given a glimpse of what was to come in the coming years and had to prepare, while the French laughed in the face of adversary now. In 2 years, their laughter will be replaced by utter hatred and humility.